quick shout out to the two Uber comrades on Patreon supporting my channel and this content. Independent Left News, definitely check them out. They're a great resource. And my partner, Thank you, Rissa. So I just wanted to share this little article by Chris Hedges that I found at Mint Press News and see what y'all think of it. I think his analysis is usually on point. There's just some stuff that I would give a mild critique to on this. Chris Hedges, America's Fate, Oligarchy, or Autocracy? Bet that's Mr. Fish. That's who does all of his cartoons. Competing systems of power in the U.S. states are divided between oligarchy and autocracy. Though there are no other alternatives, neither are pleasant. Each have peculiar and distasteful characteristics. Each pays lip service to the fiction of democracy and constitutional rights, and each exacerbates the widening social and political divide and the potential for violent conflict. And again, something that I noticed from Hedges is that he's all about nonviolent, social movements, nonviolent revolutions when, I don't know, I think that's a little bit disconnected from reality. Revolutions, are usually inherently violent because you're throwing over one system and replacing it with another one. Sometimes that requires force. So I don't necessarily agree with Hedges on that point. Sometimes, frankly, violence is necessary, right? I don't know. What do you think about that? That's definitely one point that I've, have quite a big disagreement with Hedges on. The oligarchs from establishment Republican Party figures such as Liz Cheney, Mitt Romney, George and Jeb Bush, Bill Kristol rejoined forces with the oligarchs in the Democratic Party to fight autocrats in the Republican Party who have coalesced in cult-like fashion on Donald Trump. Or if he does not run again for president, his inevitable Frankensteinian doppelganger. The lines of Republican and Democrat oligarchs exposes the burlesque that characterized the old two-party system, where the ruling parties fought over what Sigmund Freud called the narcissism of minor differences, but were united in all major structural issues, including massive defense spending, free trade deals, tax cuts for the wealthy and corporations, the endless wars, government surveillance, the money-saturated election process, neoliberalism, austerity, deindustrialization, militarized police, and the world's largest prison system. But I mean, he seems like he's leaving out, like, they're doing the bidding of capitalism, both of these parties, the corporate duopoly. That's why we need to get rid of capitalism and have a dictatorship of the proletariat, so the needs of the masses are placed before the needs of a very small elite, the capitalist class, who control both the Democrats and the Republicans. The liberal class, fearing autocracy, is thrown in its lot with the oligarchs, discrediting and rendering impotent the causes and issues it claims to champion. The bankruptcy of the liberal class is important, for it effectively turns the liberal democratic values into empty platitudes those who embrace autocracy condemn and despise. So, for example, censorship is wrong unless the contents of Hunter Biden's laptop are censored or Donald Trump is banished from social media. Conspiracy theories are wrong unless those theories, such as the Steele dossier and Russiagate, can be used to damage the autocrat. The misuse of the legal system and law enforcement agencies to carry out personal vendettas are wrong unless those vendettas are directed at the autocrat and those who support him. Giant tech monopolies and their monolithic social media platforms are wrong unless those monopolies use their algorithms, control of info, and campaign contributions to ensure the election of the oligarch's anointed presidential candidate, Joe Biden. The perfidy of the oligarchs, masked by the calls for civility, tolerance, and respect for human rights, often outdoes that of autocracy. The Trump admin, for example, expelled 440 asylum seekers using Title 22, but I don't know if he's getting into this, but that's Biden's actually expelling more. A law that permits immediate expulsion of those who potentially pose a public health risk and denies expelled migrants the right to make a case to stay in the U.S. before an immigration judge. The Biden admin not only embraced the Trump order in the name of fighting pandemic, but has thrown out more than 690,000 asylum seekers since taking office. So again, the Biden administration is just Trump 2.0, but with liberal messaging and marketing. And, they've toned down the white supremacist, racist, xenophobic, anti-immigrant rhetoric while still carrying out those exact same policies, if not increasing them, as Hedges points out here. The Biden admin, on the heels of another monstrous hurricane, triggered at least in part by climate change, has opened up. Yep, I saw that. Did a story about that. Has opened up 80 million acres of oil and gas drilling in the Gulf of Mexico and boasted that the state will produce 1.12 billion barrels of oil over the next 50 years. Again, so the Democrats, the difference between the Democrats and Republicans with regards to climate change in the U.S., Republicans will say it's not an issue, nothing to worry about, fake news, while Democrats will claim to believe in science and wanting, to fight like hell to address climate change, when you have the Biden administration opening up 80 million acres for oil and gas drilling in the Gulf of Mexico. So, Republicans, they at least don't pretend to care about these things. Democrats do, but don't do anything about it, even though they care so much, right? Has bombed Syria and Iraq, and on the way out the door in Afghanistan, murdering 10 civilians, including 7 children, in a drone strike. Has ended 3 pandemic relief programs. The eviction moratoriums over, extended unemployment benefits. What's the other one? Cutting off benefits on the pandemic, that were given to 5.1 million people who worked as freelancers in the gig economy or as caregivers. An additional 3.8 million people received assistance from the pandemic emergency unemployment compensation, where long-term unemployed have lost access to the benefits. But, Biden, has said they're not going to do any more lockdowns. I think it was last week, Kamala Harris said, the pandemic's over. And it seems like a lot of these, liberal institutions, politicians, schools, higher education are taking that same route. The school I go to, the University of Washington, very much in that same route. Pandemic's over. Nothing to see here. They joined the 2.6 million people who no longer receive the $300 weekly supplement and are struggling to cope with the $1,200 drop in their monthly earnings, which again wasn't a whole lot to begin with, right? Biden's campaign talk of raising the minimum wage, forgiving student loan debt. Can't raise the minimum wage. Parliamentarians said no. Can't forgive student loan debt. What's the fuck's his reason there? He literally, with the swipe of a pen, could cancel all student loan debt. That would disproportionately benefit the most vulnerable and marginalized, particularly people of color who have disproportionately high student loan debt. Immigration reform and making housing a human right has been forgotten. I mean, again, but you had to be somewhat disconnected from reality, I would say, to actually think that Biden was going to follow through with any of those things. One of the reasons I couldn't vote for him, because he was just so full of shit and was not going to do nearly enough for all of these multiple crises of capitalism that we're facing right now. At the same time, the Democratic leadership, proponents of a new Cold War with China, and it's so fucked, has authorized provocative military maneuvers along Russia's borders, South China Sea, to speed up production of its long-range B-21 stealth bomber. Oligarchs come from the traditional nexus of elite schools, inherited money, military, and corporations. Those see Wright Mills called the power elite. Material success, Mills notes, is their sole basis of authority. The word oligarchy is derived from the Greek word oligos, meaning a few, and it's the oligos that sees power and wealth as its birthright, which they pass on to their family and children, exemplified by George W. Bush or Mitt Romney. And again, who was it? I forgot who said it, but basically each social class, structure that you're in, you're going to be, given these various ideas of how the world works, what it looks like, who it benefits, and that's kind of what they're speaking to. The word autocracy is derived from the Greek word auto, meaning self, as in one who rules by himself. Decayed democracies, the battle of power is always, as Aristotle points out, between these two despotic forces. Although if there is a serious threat of socialism or left-wing radicalism, as was true in the Weimar Republic, Germany, right? Oligarchs forego an uncomfortable alliance with the autocrat and his henchmen to crush it. This is why the donor class and hierarchy of the Democratic Party sabotaged candidacy of Bernie Sanders. Although on the political spectrum, he's not radical. He's just a typical liberal politician, right? The oligarchs embrace a full morality of woke culture and identity politics, which is anti-politics. Let's see. Biden's admin refusal to address the deep structural inequities plagued the country is already ominous. In the latest Harvard-Harris poll, Trump has overtaken Biden in approval ratings, with Biden falling 46% and Trump rising to 48%. Wow. Add to this report by the University of Chicago Project on Security and Threats that found that 9% Americans believe the use of force, I saw that, justified to restore Donald Trump to the presidency. More than a fourth of adults agree in varying degrees. Study found that the 2020 election was stolen and Joe Biden is an illegitimate president. I mean, I'm laughing, but like, really? Really? Here's the glue that holds the autocratic regime in place. Autocratic leaders such as Joaquin Fest writes are often demonic non-entities rather than the qualities which raised him from the masses. It was those qualities he shared with them, which he was a representative example that laid the foundations for success. Fest wrote of Adolf Hitler, words that could apply to Trump. He was the incarnation of the average, the man who lent the masses his voice, and whom through the masses spoke, and whom the masses encountered themselves. It is ironically the oligarchs who build the institutions of oppression, militarized police, the dysfunctional courts, the raft of anti-terrorism laws used against dissidents, ruling through executive orders rather than legislative process, wholesale surveillance, and the promulgation, that's a good word, promulgation of laws that overturn the most basic constitutional rights by judicial fiat. Thus, the Supreme Court rules that corporations have the right to pump, is that Citizens United, unlimited amounts of money into the political campaign because it's a form of free speech and because corporations have the constitutional right to petition the government. Oligarchs do not use these mechanisms of oppression with the same ferocity as the autocrats. They employ them fitfully and therefore often ineffectually, but they create the physical and legal system of oppression so that the autocrat with the flick of a switch can establish a de facto dictatorship. The autocrat oversees a naked kleptocracy in place of a hidden one. I mean, I think that's pretty accurate. The oligarchs, but it is debatable whether the more refined kleptocracy of the oligarchs is any worse than the crude and openly kleptocracy of the autocrat. The autocrat's attraction is that he fleeces the public, he entertains the crowd, he orchestrates engaging spectacles, he gives vent, often through vulgarity, to the widespread hatred of the ruling elites. He provides a host of phantom enemies, usually the weak and vulnerable, like Trump with demonizing and castigating the immigrants. It's why you're having these issues. People know that's because it's the immigrants. It's not this system of capitalism, white supremacy, including effective liberals and intellectuals who are pathetic appendage to oligarch class. See Democratic Party elite. We must defy the oligarchs as well as the autocrats. If you replicate the cowardice of the liberal class, we'll sell up to the oligarchs as a way to blunt the rise of autocracy. We'll discredit the core values of civil society and fuel the very autocracy we seek to defeat. Despotism in all its forms is dangerous. If we achieve nothing else in the fight against the oligarchs and the autocrats, we will at least salvage our dignity and integrity. I agree with a lot of what Hedges was saying there, but I mean, I think it's important, like, to have a more of a, structural critique, perhaps more of a Marxist critique, more of a socialist critique, that these people get into these positions because of the structures of capitalism. If we really want to address any of these issues, we need to overthrow capitalism as quickly as possible before it kills, human species and a lot of life on the planet. Frankly, Hedges seems to come at it from a slightly different perspective, but he's still a very important voice, and we can still learn a great deal from him. I just when with my analysis and critique, I like to always bring it back to these structural issues, these contradictions that capitalism creates. Poverty amidst plenty. We have a very small few elite at the top, the capitalist class who's able to enrich themselves, during a pandemic while tens of millions of people lost their jobs, almost have, maybe it's even over that, close to 700,000 people dead. We can't get, universal health care during a pandemic. All of these different issues. And he's definitely right, calling out the liberal class, even, politicians, so-called, describe, progressive social democrats, they're still trying to uphold the system when we need to, tear it down and have a dictatorship of the proletariat, because there's no substantive change is going to come through the electoral process in the United States as it's currently constructed, whether it be through, Republican or Democratic leadership. They're both bought and paid for by the capitalist class. In order to get any change, it's going to come out through, outside mass movements. And, I just disagree with Hedges about, just the straight focus on nonviolent means. I think sometimes, in revolutions are often, a bloody ordeal. And to paraphrase Lenin, a revolution is not like going to a dinner party. There's going to be some things that get fucked up. There's going to probably be some bloodshed because you're overthrowing one system and installing another one. And hopefully, that would be a socialist one. So the needs of the masses are placed before the needs of a very, small elite. What do you think about what Hedges said or what I said? Let me know down below. Like the video if you liked the damn video. Subscribe for more content. All part of the people. Peace. Much love.